the May 1st, 2023 LAFCO meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Chair Mulhern,
Here.
Commissioner Ward,
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Present.
Commissioner McGorty,
Here.
Commissioner Roden,
Is that me here?
I'm here.
Oh,
Commissioner Horsley appears to be absent, Commissioner Cole,
Here.
and we have alternate Commissioner Winkle had already responded his presence. Alternate Commissioner Kristen appears to be absent. Alternate Commissioner Crane,
Auditing.
and alternate Commissioner Haschak. And we do have a quorum. Staff present also include Executive Officer Uma Hinman and Clerk Analyst Larkin Filer.
Thank you, Clerk. Also for the record, Candace Horsley is in attendance. Thank you very much, and we will move on to public expression. The Commission welcomes participation in the LAFCO meeting. Any person may address the Commission on any subject within the jurisdiction of LAFCO which is not on the agenda. There's a 3-minute limit and no action will be taken at this meeting. Larkin, I apologize, I'm not able to see. Are there any members of the public on Zoom?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public in the room that wish to come forward and speak on public expression? Seeing none, I'll move on to item number 3, other business. There are no items. Number 4, the consent calendar. The following consent items are expected to be routine and non-controversial and will be acted on by the Commission in a single action without discussion unless a request is made by a commissioner or a member of the public for discussion or separate action. Those items are 4A, the April 3rd, 2023 regular meeting summary, and item 4B, the April 2023 claims and financial reports. Are there any members of the Commission that wish to pull either of those items, or I would be looking for a motion for approval?
I have a couple of questions.
Please go ahead.
Uma, on the work that you've done, there was some Willits, there was an NOP SOI. What's the NOP?
There was we received a referral for the City of Willits' general plan. They're updating a portion of their general plan, and we provided comments on that.
And there was a GP amendment too?
Yes, that EIR included a GP amendment, so we've been coordinating with city staff off and on that.
So our attorney looked at that. Is that something that we'd be responsible for, or would that be something Willits would be responsible for?
At this time, we are responsible for that because we do not have an application from the city yet.
Okay.
This is part of our routine response to comments on EIRs.
And then the GIS, we're looking at some mapping for some applications. Would they be billing the applicant on that, or is that something we're going to take care of as well?
If the GIS services relates to generally to public inquiries or an application, if it's related to public inquiries or MSR sphere updates, that is falls on the commission to pay for that. If it is related to applications, we generally don't receive a bill, and if that we do, it's included with the applicant.
This was referring to applications, so I just wanted to know. Okay.
Okay.
Well, if there's nothing else, Madam Chair, I'll move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioners with questions? And also, just for the record, Commissioner Christian is in the room. I don't see any other questions or comments, so if we could have roll call, please, Clerk?
Certainly. Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner McGorty,
Yes.
Commissioner Roden,
Yes.
Commissioner Horsley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
and Chair Mulhern.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. We are going to move on to item 5A, public hearing for the proposed fiscal year 2023-2024 budget and work program. And just a note that there was a small typo in the agenda, and we are discussing the 2023-2024 budget and work program. Please go ahead, Uma.
Thank you, Chair Mulhern. The budget process is established in the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act and requires that the budget be at least equal to the previous year, or unless the commission can make a finding that a reduction would not impact the commission's ability to fulfill its purposes and programs. The CKH directs the commission to hold 2 public hearings on the budget process, one for the proposed budget and one for adopting a final budget. The final budget must be adopted by June 15th. In February, staff starts developing a work program that will inform the budget, and we review the current and past year's workload, trends, and identify anticipated needs such as revising application forms, application workload, and a work plan to satisfy the statutes requiring periodic sphere studies for the agencies. The budget identifies organizational services, supplies, and a work program detailing staffing needs, the work plan, and any special projects proposed for the next fiscal year. The budget includes all anticipated expenses and revenues necessary to meet those expenditures. Revenues consist primarily of apportionment fees, and then other revenue includes the service fees, which include a portion of overhead fees, which are applied to the application processing, and interest from our bank and treasury accounts. Expenditures, next slide, please. Thank you. Expenditures include basic services, services and supplies, and the work plan, which is our municipal service review and sphere updates, and application processing. Basic services is essentially the staffing needs, which at this time consist of the executive officer and the analyst positions. We are working towards adding an administrative assistant, which would also be included in this line item. Services and supplies include the costs associated with maintaining typical office operations, and the work plan identifies the schedule of MSRs and sphere updates for agencies to meet the state mandates within the CKH. Next slide, please. Development of the work program forms the basis of the proposed budget and includes the planned tasks for supporting and implementing the goals and directives of the commission and identification of the agencies scheduled for the MSR sphere updates. Basic services covers the staffing necessary for maintaining and improving office operations, support to the commission and its committees, development of policy and procedures, outreach and coordination with other agencies, responding to public inquiries, and our involvement in regional planning activities. In developing the work program for next fiscal year, staff is proposing to put more focus on addressing organizational efficiencies, including updating policies and procedures and a streamlined review process for MSR sphere updates. Next slide, please. Services and supplies are the expenses associated with administering the functions of the office. That includes memberships, such as CALAFCO and the California Special District Association, staff and commission trainings and conferences, preparing the annual audit, and special service contracts with such as our contract with the county to provide IT services and GIS services, and our contract with the private legal firm for legal counsel services. We are in the process of establishing a new contract with the firm or individual for legal counsel services, and we also anticipate increasing utilization of selected legal counsel for tasks that are better suited to their expertise. Next slide, please. The statutes under which LAFCO mandates the review of municipal service providers every 5 years as needed. Each year, staff develops a proposed work plan as part of the budget development process, and that is reviewed and prioritized based on the agency's provision of municipal services, the date of the last sphere update, and any pressing issues or development pressures on the agencies. The proposed work plan for the next year is to complete the 7 coastal region water and wastewater districts and 10 mutual water companies. For one of those wastewater districts, this will be the first round MSR and sphere study. For the other 6 districts, this will be the second round sphere update and present an opportunity to delve into the service issues at levels that will better prepare the commission to address the water supply stressors and applications for reorganizations that we are seeing.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, in that review, is it, are you evaluating the ability of the companies to deliver water? Or how does it work?
Yes, municipal service review is basically a snapshot in time of the health of that agency, and the commission must make findings on their capacity and their ability to provide their services adequately, as well as what their service area should be. So that is certainly a part of that, is their ability to provide their service and any deficiencies.
And do you review official reports to like Department of Water Resources, Drinking Water Department, or how do you handle that?
Do we use other studies? Was that
Yes.
the question? Yes. We collect as much data as we can from the agencies themselves, and we also do searches for additional reports and studies on those agencies, from
And
various agencies.
then you'll publish a final report or review that will be a public record?
Correct. The process for municipal service reviews is they come to the commission and in a draft form, and then the commission will take action on that, and once it's adopted, it is posted on our website and available to any agency or member of the public.
So I would specifically request that the report be forwarded to the Mendocino County Water Agency, which is very small, but it does exist. So,
Thank you. Noted. While we intend to initiate the development of these studies this fiscal year, the bulk of the work will occur in the next year. Implementation of the work plan can be accomplished either by doing the studies in-house or by outsourcing the studies to consultants. As we've found in previous years, the challenges in implementing the work plan are staff capacity and budget. So the staff priorities are operations and applications, which means that the progress on the work plan task often slows down when the staff workload is high. Staff is recommending outsourcing these studies this next fiscal year, which will also allow staff time to develop a streamlined process for reviewing the other agencies' spheres on a 5-year schedule.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Ward has a question.
I have a
And ju-
question.
And just a reminder for everybody, you have a little highlighter in your drawer, and it's often used as a signal to me that you want to speak. Thank you.
So assuming this budget gets approved next month, when would you go out for an RFP for the work plan for the water district?
We would start developing the RFP this next month and have that ready to go so that we can get started.
Do you anticipate it to be completed by June of '24?
That is the hope. Would depend on the schedule that's put together and proposed by consultants. But that would be the hope,
Yeah, it'd be
intent.
nice to get a work plan done within our budget year. Okay, thank you.
The next slide, please. So implementation of the work plan can be, let's see, challenges, staff priorities, again, are operations and maintenance, so we are recommending outsourcing, and then also developing that streamlined process. So next slide, please. The proposed budget is broken into 3 general categories: expenditures, revenues, and reserves. Proposed expenditures total $320,000, which represent an increase of 21% above the current fiscal year, primarily due to the impact of high inflation from vendors, actual expenditures and cost projections, and an increase in the work plan budget to support the outsourcing of those studies. The increase in operating expenditures would result in an increase in operational reserves to meet the 25% policy target. Next slide. Revenue consists of unreserved equity or cash balance, apportionment fees, the overhead portion of the service fees collected, and interest. The projected unreserved equity is approximately $56,000 and consists of the collected overhead from service fees and remaining budget from this year, primarily as a result of delays in the work plan and the travel accounts. After 2 years without change, the proposed budget includes a 3.6% increase in apportionment fees to $275,000. The apportionments are established by the Commission through adoption of the budget and calculated and invoiced to our funding agency by the county auditor per the formula set forth in statute. The formula is a 1/3 split between the 3 categories of agencies, so the county, the 4 cities, and the 50 independent special districts. 49, sorry. The formula further spreads the apportionment amongst the agencies in a category based on the annual operating revenue of each agency. At the beginning of the current fiscal year, new service rates went into effect that included a portion of overhead that is collected and applied towards the operational and work plan costs. Staff is projecting that collection of those fees for this current fiscal year will be about $9,000 and estimate approximately $10,000 in the next year. Interest is the final source of revenue and captures the typical interest earned through the county treasury where our apportionments are held, and our 2 bank accounts, which consist of checking and reserves. Next slide, please. LAFCO has 2 reserves categories and a work plan contingency. Our legal reserves are maintained at $50,000, and no change is proposed to that. Our policy states that the operating reserve should be 25% of the operating budget, which means it fluctuates annually. 25% of the proposed budget would necessitate a 12% increase to $80,000. The work plan contingency is the accumulation of a portion of the unused work plan budget in a fiscal year and allows for more flexibility in implementing the work plan, which often extends past a single fiscal year, and for possible changes such as a change from in-house preparation to outsourcing. This year, the contingency is approximately $30,000. For next fiscal year, there's a proposed increase, so it's just over $37,000. And the next slide, please.
Member Gonzalez.
Question, it goes back to apportionment fees. I get it that the cities and county are probably better able to handle an increase. Or is the many small districts we have we ever had any not be able to pay them?
I believe the way it's set up in the state statutes, they don't have an option. The auditor will withhold their funds if they don't pay by the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, but you're not aware of whether any of them struggled to pay our fees or anything?
Not that I have not heard personally.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, thank you. So the unused work plan money of $37,000, I believe our work plans are completed, right? Because we postponed. We had $70,000 that I think was earmarked for that. So the only work plan that I know of now is the 7 water districts. So we're looking at $137,000 for that now?
No, the 37, or the remainder from this fiscal year is applied towards next year's budget as part of the unreserved equity. So it is calculated into the revenues portion of our budget.
Well, you show it as a contingency right now. It's not a revenue.
It's under, if you look at the screen, you'll see it on the first line, the unreserved equity. That's the cash balance from the remainder of this year. So the estimated cash balance at the fiscal year end in the blue column at the bottom is $56,000. That's applied in the row 1 under proposed revenue.
Yeah, so the 37,000 is part of the 56,000?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
This table shows two options for apportionments and the resulting impacts to reserves and the work plan contingency. The red box identifies the proposed apportionments fees of $275,000. So that's a $10,000 increase from last year, again spread amongst the 55 funding agencies. Next slide, please. This slide provides a visual comparison of similarly sized LAFCOs. The graph includes the categories of staffing, which is in blue, the work plan in green, office operations in orange, and the contingencies in gray. The top three LAFCOs are Butte, El Dorado, and Nevada LAFCOs. They each have full-time employees, 1.5 to 3 full-time employees. Humboldt, Shasta, and Mendocino have contract staff. So that is the main reason for the wide variance in the budgets. And next slide, please. Staff recommends adopting resolution number 2022-2311, approving the proposed budget and work program and directing staff to distribute the proposed budget to the 55 funding agencies for review and to notice a public hearing for the final budget and work program for June 5th. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. And as was noted in the slide, we did have one meeting regarding the budget already on April 3rd. So at this time, I would like to ask the commissioners or if there are any additional questions or comments. Mr. Ward.
I'm trying to get a handle on the staffing issue. You say that we don't have enough staff time to complete it. You put in a basic services represents a certain percentage of our budget, but you say that it's a .76 full-time position. Is that for all your staff? Does that include, I mean, it adds up to all your staff is .76?
Correct. We have the equivalent of .76.
Okay. So your basic service is 133,000 this next fiscal year. Based on a full-time person, that would be about 175,000. How much more do you make in application revenue?
Well, it depends. This last year, I think the revenue, the overall revenue for application was about 19,000. And that includes, again, that's at the service rate fee.
And I believe you're expecting application revenue of 30,000 the next fiscal year? So with the person that you're, and I don't know if you're going to announce it or you're going to talk about it today about another analyst position, would that increase the .76 full-time equivalent?
I do have a new analyst, part-time analyst that is starting tomorrow. And so we'll be bringing her on to help with the application processing and then also development of the work plan. If she is on the applications, working on the applications, that does not count towards the FTE. She's an employee of Hinman and Associates, so she'll be working on other projects as well, besides Mendocino LAFCO. So I don't believe it affects that .76 FTE.
So could you increase your .76 to 1 to include more staff time to do these projects? Or do you have other jobs or something that you can't, that's the reason you can't put more than .76 into this LAFCO?
Well, it's the budget limitations is the reason for the .76 FTE. When we first started, it was .5 FTE shared amongst an EO, an analyst, and a clerk. As we've increased the budget, this is just to, this .76 is not something that is specified by the LAFCO. It has not been specified how much staffing they want. This is what we're proposing and the equivalent FTE, just based on the budget. So we will be utilizing the new analyst to support the application processing and also the work plan efforts in particular. Otherwise, she'll probably be working on other jobs.
Okay. Last question. This fiscal year, your budget was, your basic services, 125, I think, and then there was $70,000 earmarked for work plan costs. Well, you didn't spend $70,000 this year in work plans, so, but but let's just go forward now. We're not going to spend too much on the work plan for the next year because you're going to go out to an RFP. You can have some expenses. So what's going to happen to all that time that you won't be working on work plans?
We anticipate a high workload related to application processing. So and we also have included in the work program development of a streamlined process for reviewing municipal service reviews and sphere updates, so that we can have a quick review, identify those agencies that don't necessarily need a comprehensive update, and to come up with a procedure for quickly reviewing those and asking for, bringing it to the commission for concurrence that there's no further action needed on those. So developing that process and that procedure. We also anticipate updating the policies and procedures manual to make it more current with the current legislative directives and statutes. So we have focused more on organizational efficiencies and creating those efficiencies this next fiscal year, and that is part of the intent of outsourcing the work plan, so that we have enough time to do those things. The staff has really been focused on the work plan development and the applications, and so has been more, this is a more proactive approach on developing efficiencies with the office administration and carrying out the directives of the commission.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Horsley.
I like where you're going with that, Commissioner Ward. I was thinking along the same lines. However, we have the 56,000 this year, and there's a real dichotomy between what we need to do and our staffing or our ability to pay. So we won't have that 56,000 perhaps next year, and to expect the small districts, cities, and counties to make up the difference, I don't think it's attainable. So we need to look at other options in the coming year, and I agree with Commissioner Ward that that is an option that we could look at that might help with that budget for next year. So, but we can delve into that. We have time to do that. Thank you.
Member McGorty.
So, in your way of thinking on that, Commissioner Horsley, are you thinking that would become part of a reserve that we would then spend next year?
What I was thinking was if we don't have any excess funds like we did cash this year, that there's no way the apportionments can make up the difference without really a real hard kick to everybody. So we need to maybe look at other options such as staffing that is less expensive than consultants but could get some of the job done, and then go from there. I'll tell you, my real concern here is the little caveat that the budget has to be greater than the previous fiscal year, according to, as you said, the Cortese-Knox law, unless there's findings a reduction in staffing or program expenses will nevertheless allow the commission to fulfill its purposes and programs. So I think that is something we have to constantly keep in mind in this next year, to me, in this next year on how we do that. But without that 56,000, how is it attainable? And I don't have an answer. I'm just saying that is something I think we really need to keep in mind. Thank you.
Mr. Ward.
Thank you. We've always had a carryover every year that I've been on the board or the commission, but I agree it's a little higher typically this year. I'm more or less, my desire was to get more work done with with the staffing we have, and then with the additional part-time analysts, I brought up the idea of doing some MSRs with application only, just update, because there's a lot of districts that don't change, and we could easily get a lot of those done and take care of them for their 5-year review or whatever. So that was my point. I'll worry about next year's budget, I guess, if we're under, because we do have reserves for that. But I'm just trying to get more work done and get the staffing to do more. So that's all. And we're putting out an RFP for $100,000 possibly, whereas you've always done your own work plans. So that I think will free up money, in my opinion. But we'll see how it all works out. I guess I'll be here maybe next year. We'll see. But I'm just trying to get more work done with so we can keep moving forward.
Please go ahead.
One of the things that we have proposed for this next fiscal year is gets directly to what you're saying, in developing a streamlined process where we can do kind of a checklist review of the agencies and determine whether or not there is change that warrants a more comprehensive study. So that will hopefully make for a faster review for a good number of agencies, which would be, of course, cheaper in the long run. So there would be cost savings from that, as well as for staffing.
I can think of about 5 or 10 cemetery districts you could check off right now.
Thank you for that. And not seeing any other commissioner comments on the dais, I'd like to move to the online commissioners. And if you are using Zoom, you can use the raise your hand feature through the Zoom platform, or you can press *9 on your phone. Not seeing any hands on Zoom, so I'd invite any members of the public to come forward if they have comments on this item. And not seeing anybody come forward, would anybody like to present a motion to bring the final budget and work program to the June 5th, 2023 LAFCO meeting?
I would like to move.
Thank you. Member Gonzalez.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Commissioner McGorty,
Yes.
Commissioner Roden,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Horsley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
and Chair Mulhern.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 6, workshop items, and there are no workshops for today. Item number 7A, a firm/individual selection to provide general legal counsel services. The commission will consider the executive committee recommendation of Marcia A. Birch Law Office for firm/individual selection of general legal counsel services and provide staff direction related to proceeding with contract negotiation. Executive Officer Hinman, would you mind providing a little bit of background for this item and the reason that the selection process moved forward in the way that it did?
Yes, thank you, Chair Mulhern. Since 2012, Mendocino LAFCO has maintained a contract with Scott Brown for legal counsel services. About a year and a half ago, Mr. Brown went on an extended medical leave, and Marcia Birch, who serves as his backup for his 8 LAFCOs, has been serving as our legal counsel, general legal counsel in his absence. In January of this year, Mr. Brown informed us of his intentions to scale back his practice. So in response, the executive committee directed staff to initiate an RFP for legal counsel services, which was released at the end of January. Although public contracts for technical services, including legal counsel, are exempt from the competitive bid regulations, it is a good practice to use an RFP process, which is why the executive committee made that direction. So staff developed an RFP and distributed the solicitation at the end of January, to which we received 8 proposals by the deadline. The review process included an initial review and scoring by staff with the aid of a personnel committee, which consisted of commission officers, Chair Mulhern, and Treasurer Ward. The primary considerations were qualifications, cost effectiveness, and the potential for conflict of interest. On April 18th, the executive committee met to consider the proposals, and the committees, the personnel committees confirmed scoring and ranking, which recommendation of Marcia Birch. The main discussion points from the meeting and summary of the proposal evaluation start on page 41 of your agenda packet. I will note that we did have some robust conversation about the item, and also public comment as well. And those discussions and concerns are at the top of page 41 and are captured in that staff report. The executive committee voted 2-1 to recommend Marcia Birch to the commission for consideration. And so staff is requesting commission direction regarding the committee's recommendation and proceeding with the contract negotiation. Upon commission selection, staff will work with the firm or individual to develop a contract for the commission's approval at the next regular meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Commissioner McGorty.
Was there any controversy in this decision?
Yes, thank you for asking. I will say that there were some concerns that were raised during the executive office, during the executive committee about using Marcia, and I think that that's exactly why Executive Officer Hinman noted that there was robust discussion on during that meeting, and from my perspective, I think that the qualifications of Ms. Birch to be our legal counsel for meeting representation and specific needs and direct communication with the executive officer has her well qualified for that. There were some concerns about specific LAFCO applications that might come forward for tax sharing, and at the point when that happens, there's an opportunity to select alternate legal counsel that has more expertise in that. So I'll go to Commissioner Roden and then Commissioner Horsley.
Yeah. I'll speak to, I was the dissenting vote. And I think when I think about how to proceed this morning, I guess I'd like to kind of divide the issues about who we want to pick from the process. And I felt that there were flaws in the process, and that because of these flaws, I don't have a lot of, I don't agree with the way the points came out. So I guess I'd like to I'll just say briefly a few of my process problems. There were certain like ways in which the way the points were allocated. So there was this goes to maybe a prior process problem, was that the way I understood it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Uma, that there was a personnel committee meeting after the last LAFCO meeting, and that was Mo and Jerry as the officers. And I think that this is what I understood from our executive committee meeting, is that staff presented their rankings and their recommendation to the personnel committee. And I guess there was some discussion, but they pretty much just went with the staff recommendation. And then we had an executive committee meeting, and the only difference between the executive committee meeting and the personnel committee meeting was me. and I had a lot of questions about it, but it was almost like we would ratify, the executive committee would just ratify. And I felt that it would have been more objective if the members of the executive committee had on their own completed a ranking on a basis that was objective and we all agreed upon, and then came together to discuss those and come up with our own, recommendations, and then maybe the top three, if we had questions, or we would do interviews with those. And so that was a process problem for me. And then, like, the way the points were allocated, this is the staff recommendation of how points were allocated. And, for example, the conflicts of interest. If there was a conflict of interest stated in a proposal, points were taken out, just because there was a conflict of interest, even though it's common for conflicts of interest to be managed. And maybe we would not choose a proposal because the conflicts were too great and it would really stymie our work. And that, that's possible. But just because there was a conflict didn't seem like a good reason to deduct points. And then, like, another thing was rates. And I was trying to think last night about an objective way to how you would assign points to rates, because it's like, well, 22 here or 15 here. And I thought, well, Uma, did you have I should ask you if you had a system when you assigned points for the rates that the proposers charged, or was it like the other one where you said it was sort of a subjective deduction of points?
It was a subjective. I do want to say that this is a process that was, we essentially copied from a different LAFCO.
Yeah, no, but
With the point structure and the criteria.
Yeah.
So they were subjective. It was,
It's okay.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
let folks know we didn't make it up from scratch.
Yeah, no, I thought the RFP was good, and I thought the criteria were good, but, and so it's just a very narrow and specific, and, I don't want you to feel badly about it. I just want us to, be aware of it, and maybe we can do it better next time. So I was thinking that if we could get look at all the rates that were proposed and take the mean, the average, and then we could say if a particular proposer deviates from that mean by like 10%, maybe we deduct 5 points. If they deviate by 15%, we deduct another 5 points, like some objective way to assign points for the rates. Because they're all they're pretty close to each other, So do you want to separate applicants or proposers by a lot, even though their rates are maybe market rates? So I was trying to be objective about that. So I'm explaining some of the problems I have that resulted in my disagreement that Marcia Birch Law Office would have the most points. And so I went and, I read them all, and I decided that, I really didn't need to mess with conflicts of interest, because for the reasons I stated before, or client references, because I thought, well, those would come into play when we call the references, or if they didn't state references, we would deduct points. And then there's additional information. And everybody got all the points for references and additional information anyway. So they really just differed on their qualifications and their rates. So I don't know, should I stop here with maybe just talking about I guess I would conclude that based on my trying to analyze this in as objective a way as I could, that really I went placing the most importance in my mind on qualifications, and less so on the rates, because the rates are all pretty close. That there were 3 that I think that are really high, and that maybe we should consider interviewing and asking questions, particularly around potential conflicts. And that was Best Krieger, Colantano, Highsmith, and Watley, and then the Sloan, Sakai, and Young. In my view, those were the top 3. And I have more that I could say later if we do get into a discussion about which particular I guess I'll just hold my comments about why I felt, unless people want to know why I felt that Marcia didn't rank in the top 3.
I would like to go to Member Horsley and then Member McGordy, and I just want to say that for the record, the Personnel Committee received the same packet, essentially the same packet of information, and had time to review all of the applicants and the criteria that staff used to put forward a recommendation before we had our conversation in the Personnel Committee. So that information hasn't changed, and we had time to review all of the applicants or all of the respondents before that meeting. So I did do that. So Member Horsley, Member McGordy, and then Member Ward.
Thank you, Chair. One quick question for our executive officer. Has there been any follow-up questions with any of these firms or contact with any of these firms?
Other than updates on the process, no.
Okay, thank you. So I have not talked to any other agencies or any other person on this board, and I did my own evaluation. And I want to just say that, to me, the two top criteria were expertise and neutrality. My own experience with LAFCO of the past was there were individuals that had certain agendas, and they did everything in their power to see those agendas fulfilled, no matter what the project or what was being submitted. And so I think neutrality, I know that hasn't been mentioned, but to me, that's a really high on the list. And so I looked at all of these and did the criteria, and I don't know Marcia, you know, I haven't been here long enough to know her. I'm just looking at the paper submittals. That's what I base this on. And we really did get some very excellent submissions, and it's interesting because my top three were Colantano, Sloan, and BBK. And based on their expertise, on their experience, on the breadth of their attorneys, I just want to say that the Inland Water and Power Commission just hired a very good firm. It was about 1.5 years ago, an excellent firm with a lot of expertise. What a difference it's made. I mean, in getting answers, in stopping controversy, because they have the answers, and they can stop the conflict, because it's not well, that isn't how we interpret, or that isn't how we interpret. They have the answers. And it's the same, I think, with the sanitation district. It's just someone who has that expertise makes such a difference when you're negotiating with other people or working with other people and other agencies. And it's so worth it, I think, to pay a little extra to get that, because if you don't want to spend $6 million on litigation, which we've seen in this county recently, having people that can work with others and that can know the laws, and you can stop all of that, a lot of that litigation, because they have the expertise. So I understand the whole thing with Colantano and, you know, City of Ukiah, well done for having them. They look excellent. I also know there's a lot of applications coming forward from Ukiah. So the conflict of interest and the number of times they may have to bow out, that is a factor to me. I don't think there's another conflict of interest here that's with BBK. That's the sanitation district, but I don't see a lot of applications coming forward from the sand district. We've got our out of area service agreement completed. We have our MSR, we have our sphere of influence, and basically with the annexations that are being proposed by the City of Ukiah, I don't see the sand district having a lot of conflict of interest here, or it would be very rare looking into the future. And I've talked with our director, and she doesn't see it either. So I'll leave it at that. And looking at, you know, if you're looking at a difference between some of the rates, the additional hours, it's between $280 and $295. It's $15 per hour. So for 10 additional hours, it's only $150. It's just not that much. I know it's much more than with Marcia, But on paper, I just don't see the expertise there unless we're depending on Scott Brown, if that's the expertise that we're depending on. But they didn't really talk much about what his background was. So again, it's just on paper that I'm looking. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Member McGorty.
So was this basically a paper sort without any actual interviews?
I did not interview any of the firms. I reviewed the applications that they submitted.
That's correct. There is the option to interview. We did include that in the RFP, that they may be called forward for interviews. It isn't strictly, I mean, from staff's perspective, it's not strictly a paper thing. You know, we have worked with Marcia for the last year and a half. She is highly qualified. That may not show up in her proposal. She does have extensive CKH experience. She is a Deputy General Counsel for Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and has huge amounts of CEQA expertise and litigation experience. So that also, because we know that at the staff level, was taken into consideration. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
So I'd just kind of build on what Commissioner Horsley said of the importance of outcome rather than the cost. And the attorneys that I think operate the best are the ones that keep things at the lowest level and solve problems quickly rather than building things up into a really big deal. And that ends up being very, very expensive. And I don't know how you measure that, or if you're able to follow some of their casework or advice that they've given other organizations. Those are things that I think are important to check out. So I'm not sure that this process was the most robust, and I kind of share your concerns.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A little bit of background, I think from 2000 to 2012, I think when we first went out to an RFP for council, we used county council here in the county. And we didn't have too many, I've been on the commission since 2000, we haven't had too many issues dealing with attorneys. Scott Brown was, we went with Scott Brown because of his expertise in LAFCOs. He represented, I think, 7 or 8 different LAFCOs. And so that's why we went forward with Scott. And the situation came up again as Scott wanted to retire, and Marcia has been doing it. She's been with various LAFCOs as well. So my concern was we haven't had a lot of issues with that. Now, of course, we're getting into some more applications and whatnot, but one of the things that I brought up was if we do need somebody that needs more CEQA or tax sharing agreement, we can hire somebody else. We don't have to rely on Marcia Birch. So I read all the proposals. I pretty much had my idea going in before I even knew what the personnel committee had come up with, and I had Marcia on my top. The reason for it is because we have a reputation with her already, and because our budget is so slim, I like the idea that we're only spending $1,000 a month from $900. So that was one of the concerns. And then my last question, the one that really took me to Marcia, was I asked staff, who do you want to work with? When I hire an attorney, I want an attorney that I've already had a relationship with, or I could trust and work with. I'm not going to work with Marcia. You, staff, will be. So that was I think the last thing that I wanted to hear was the staff was willing to work with Marcia. So I believe even this year we expected $19,000 in legal fees. We're only going to spend $11,000. We're going to have $8,000 that we don't have to spend. I don't believe Marcia needs to be at every meeting. I don't think that we don't call on her a lot. You talk to her. I see the invoices from her. It's an hour here and an hour there. We just don't have a lot to deal with. There are some big firms here. If we need to get into a litigation situation, let's hire one of them. But for a commission, legal counsel, she does an excellent job, and I think we should continue with her. I wasn't even really interested in going out to an RFP because I didn't think it was broke. So wherever the commission wants to go, but I still go with staff recommendation, executive committee recommendation.
Thank you. We'll go back to Commissioner Roden, Commissioner Gonzalez, then I'll go online to the Zoom.
I just quickly want to reply to some of the things that Mr. Ward said. One is that we would just hire out when we need to, and in my, I don't know, I think that that's inefficient because, an outside counsel will then have to review everything that that our regular counsel does, so that's going to take more time. Another efficiency of getting a firm that has expertise is that there are paralegals there. So much work, there's some hours that would be billed by a paralegal at much lower rate. And then you were saying you were happy about, only $1,000 a month, but that's a flat fee. I mean, that's every month. I mean, maybe in December we don't have a meeting, we're still paying the flat fee. Whereas all the other firms are charging by the hour. It's possible that we would be paying less than $1,000 a month if we have a month when we don't pay or that we don't use the attorney. And if we use fewer hours than $1,000 a month, there's nothing in the proposal that says we're going to get a refund on our money. It's just a flat fee. So I'm not sure that that's such a great deal or such an advantage in the Birch proposal. And then finally, the other point you made was about working well with staff, and I agree. I think that's really important. But staff only has experience with the Birch firm, and that's great that it works well. But it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be that sort of responsiveness from another firm. And then I think we would want to ensure that there was a similar kind of responsiveness, and that we would end the contract if that weren't the case. So that's why I don't think that argument holds a lot of water for me, even though I do think it's an important point.
Thank you. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Sorry. I just kind of want to go on record that I kind of want to echo Commissioner Ward's sentiments. When I go into legal setting, I want to trust and have a relationship with my attorney. And I looked at some of the attorneys that, a lot of them are really qualified. I know some of them, and from other experiences. But I know that from some of those firms, you might get a paralegal. You might get a paralegal most of the time. I know that some of them say that they would assign a specific attorney, but they're big hitters. Maybe if we start putting demands on them, we'll get a bigger bill. Again, I just want to echo that I have that trust with the Birch firm. They've been here, and like Commissioner Ward said, I think if we have an issue, we go out. I think even cities go out, specialty attorneys, when your city attorney feels it's a specialty issue, they'll go out and get a specialist. That was it.
Thank you. I'd like to go online now to Zoom. Oh, sorry, excuse me.
No.
Commissioner Christian.
Just a couple comments on process. It sounds like and echoing Commissioner Roden's point about process, it sounds like some of the attributes that one might take into consideration in this evaluation were not considered, maybe, CEQA or Commissioner McGordy's comment about simplicity, expertise seems like it was considered, but so just a suggestion that maybe we need to reevaluate for future processes the attributes that were selected for this process, and maybe reweighting them to reflect what our utilities are. and possibly get independent ratings in the process from different individuals before there's a conversation, and then maybe incorporating that into policies and procedures. So it's just a comment about process. I don't know any of these attorneys, and you know, haven't been involved in this kind of selection process, but a conversation around that seems to be important. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for that. And the executive committee did know that this is something that the Policies and Procedures Committee should take up, what the future RFP process is going to look like, specifically so that that can be part of the record moving forward. So heading to our virtual participants, you may use the raise hand feature on Zoom or *9 on your phone if you have comments or questions about this process or the submitted proposals. And I'm not seeing any hands, so I'd like to move to in the room. Are there any comments from audience members on item 7A? Seeing none, Executive Officer Hinman, did you have any final remarks or comments?
I did have a couple final comments, specifically about working with Marcia, because there have been a couple of things raised. I wanted to be clear on her areas. Her primary areas of practice are water law, CEQA, which she is very good at, and local government. So I just wanted to be clear on that because the CEQA piece of it has been thrown around, and I think she would be pretty insulted.
And local what? And local government.
Local government,
Okay.
yes. It's undeniable that there are very good firms that have submitted proposals. BBK and Colantano in particular are some of the primo LAFCO attorneys in the state. I know attorneys from both, and I have talked with them extensively at staff workshops and the CALAFCO conferences. Have nothing against them whatsoever. I like them personally very much. As a staff person working with our legal counsel, we found Marcia to be very easy to talk to, very accessible to us. We can pick up the phone, ask her a quick question. She's very good at getting back to us very quickly, and I appreciate that. She's really easy for us to work with. We've also found her to be a great problem solver. She does not work under the shadow of Scott Brown. She is very much, has her own mind and her own approach to things, and I think where Mr. Brown has decades and decades of LAFCO experience with 8 very active LAFCOs. He's developed very strong feelings and approaches towards certain issues, and we have not found that to be the case with Marcia. She is always open to looking for the best way to solve a problem. I just wanted to mention those things. We certainly, as staff, certainly recognize that the process could have been cleaner and better. We did the best we could in the short period of time we had to implement this. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we used a process that was developed and used by other LAFCOs. We certainly, but we do recognize that it could have been a better process. And if the commission's will is for us to delve into that and redo any portion of that, we are happy to do that. But I did want to share our personal experience with Marcia and what we know of her, working with her and her expertise. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I would love to bring it back to the commission. There has been a recommendation by the executive committee to use Marcia Birch, and I am just looking for either more comments or a motion. Commissioner Roden.
Well, I think it's, I hear what staff is saying about expertise with local government and CEQA and water issues. I think, however, that specific LAFCO experience matters when we're talking about issues relating to annexations or consolidations, experience. Having done those in the past in other places, I think that matters and that we shouldn't consider that specialty legal. For the purposes of our commission, that needs to be what they do, have expertise in CKH. And I mean, the Sloan, well, anyway, they don't have any, I think they had no conflicts at all here. But anyway, I think what would be good is for maybe today, the commission chooses 3 or maybe even 4 of the firms and goes back and has a conversation, interviews them, asks specific questions, and then we choose. Instead of just making it a paper evaluation.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward?
Is that a motion?
I appreciate conversation. I want to hear what other commissioners think. If there's support for that, then we could turn it into a motion. But we haven't had conversation. We've kind of people just make their point, and then someone else makes a point, and I haven't heard us responding to what each other says. And that would be helpful for us arriving at the right action, I think.
Well, if it's not a motion, I was going to make a motion to approve the executive committee's recommendation. See where it goes.
Okay. Do we have a motion on the floor? Commissioner McGorty?
I agree with Commissioner Roden about the importance of face-to-face interviews when you're choosing key staff. You really need to know what the person's like. I mean, they can write wonderful things on paper, but to actually see them face-to-face and to see how they engage, see if they have interpersonal communication skills, which is something so critical that sometimes I find that consultants don't have. And they're not able to catch subtleties in the room of how people are reacting to things. I think that's so important, and this is such a flawed way to go, as far as I'm concerned. And it could be that Marcia really is the best, I don't know. But until it's not that hard to schedule interviews for 3 people and have the group one morning go through it and see who's there and do it that way.
I'll go to Commissioner Cole and then to Commissioner Ward.
Yes, I'm kind of backing up with Glenn's point, Commissioner McGorty. It seems like there's enough discussion that we're not ready to move on this. I'm feeling the same way, and especially with Commissioner Horsley's comments in addition to that, I would certainly support, one of my questions was, is there a rush to this? What's our deadline for this? I mean, of course you want this to happen as soon as possible, right? I mean.
Correct. We don't actually have a deadline. Marcia Birch we have a contract with Scott Brown, and Marcia Birch will act as our legal counsel until we have replaced or made a decision.
Okay. So it seems like I would certainly be in support of one more round with the top 3.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ward?
Yeah, Commissioner McGorty, how do you propose we do it? I mean, we're going to do it at each meeting, we're going to have special meetings, we're going to have 3 people, we're going to have them all come in. Who's going to ask the questions? I mean, how's the process going to work? I don't want to take a lot of time on this.
Typically, you have an ad hoc who will put together the questions, and then it's great if you can schedule time. Specifically for this, I wouldn't try to run it during a meeting, but I think that those that want to participate, you have them come, and then they, much as you did already, they kind of rank up their choices, and then the ad hoc delivers it to the board for approval or not.
Is it do we come up with questions and submit them to them and they give us answers, or do you want to look them in the eye?
Both.
Both? Well, that takes time, doesn't it?
It does take time, but you know, it's worth it. And staying out of a $6 million lawsuit because you have the right counsel is really worth it. And I kind of agree with Commissioner Horsley about that you want to be sure you've got somebody who's got the knowledge, experience, and personality to help you when you have a conflict going on. I don't doubt that Marcia Birch can handle all the day-to-day stuff, and this is certainly not a slight on her. And it could be that at the end, that's who we choose. But we want to be sure that we've done our best when we're choosing a key person in our team.
One more question. Does the ad hoc I guess an ad hoc committee, what you're suggesting, do you come up with the top 3 then, or do you want to do all 7 or 8?
Usually these things start with a paper sort, and then because of time, you usually say, this is the top 3 we want to interview. That's normally how you do it. I wouldn't interview everybody. That's too time consuming.
I know Commissioner Roden didn't have the attorney that I went in her top 3, so I was concerned about that.
I mean, that's fine.
We call for the question.
Yeah, and I just want to comment, and as being on the Personnel Committee and the chair and having worked from the City of Ukiah side and now working from the LAFCO side, the difference between Scott Brown and Marcia, I've been very comfortable with and felt like the Personnel Committee, which I am a part of, did make the correct choice in reviewing all of the information, and specifically because of the conflicts. And I understand Commissioner Roden's thought process that maybe she felt like that weighed less. I think that's critical, especially because the City of Ukiah does have several important applications coming forward. And for me, wanting to move forward with this contract to make sure that staff has comfort level to have the day-to-day projects and questions answered and managed, and the ability to seek different counsel for specific applications seemed to me a good compromise to be able to move forward. So Clerk Larkin, could you please give a roll call to the motion that's on the floor? You need the motion? There was. It was Mr. Ward and Mr. Gonzalez.
Certainly. Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner McGorty,
No?
Commissioner Roden,
No.
Commissioner Horsley,
No.
Commissioner Cole,
No.
Chair Mulhern,
Yes.
and the motion fails.
So what I would be looking for, bless you, next is the, I suppose, an alternate process for hiring legal counsel. I think we can give direction to Executive Officer Hinman to proceed with that. In that my mind might look like the executive officers, or the executive committee, pardon me, would be meeting with the top 3 or 4 applicants. Perhaps each commissioner, if you have specific questions that you did not feel were answered in the proposals that were submitted that apply to LAFCO, if you could submit those directly to EO Hinman so that she can, tabulate all of those for the meetings with the applicants, because for me, my questions were answered in a way that I felt comfortable with the decision that was made to move forward. So I feel a little bit unsure about what it is that you are expecting us to do differently at this point. Commissioner McGorty.
Well, I think it is to include a little bit more robust information about their track record working in LAFCO and what kind of experiences they've had when conflicts have arisen. That's one thing. I'm wondering too if the interviews can be done via Zoom so that the other commissioners can watch it without participating, which I don't think would be a Brown Act violation, so that we can get a sense too of the individual people who would potentially be staff members.
Commissioner Horsley.
And I would appreciate being able to hear Marcia give some of her background that wasn't on the paper in more detail too, which would be a good thing.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have feedback for our executive officer about what you would like to see this process look like? I think the more specific, the better, because we all received the information in advance of today's meeting. So if there's something that was missing, please go ahead, Mr. Christian.
I just want to comment that having been a consultant and these attorneys are consultants, when you do interview, especially a big firm, and you talk to the principal who comes in and talks about their expertise, that you really need to know whether the principal is going to be working on your work, because oftentimes it gets passed on to somebody else. And so I'm, from expertise myself, I'm a little cynical about working with bigger firms. Again, as I said, I don't know anything about these people, but just something to keep in mind.
Thank you for that. I'd like to go to our Zoom participants. If there are any specific asks that you have for this process, would you please raise your hand and weigh in now? Or if nothing's coming to mind right now, I'm sure that Executive Officer Hinman would be happy to accept an email or phone call with your questions or concerns. If anybody is on Zoom and would like to raise your hand, you may do that, or you may use the *6 to raise your, no, I apologize, *9 to raise your hand. And seeing no hands, I would invite any members of the audience to come forward if they have specific questions or concerns that were not addressed in this process. If you would like to have those included for this next step, I would appreciate your feedback. And again, if nothing comes to mind today, I'm sure that Executive Officer Hinman would gratefully accept your thoughts in the future. Commissioner Roden and then Commissioner McGorty.
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts. One is to ask the firms that we interview what sort of work they would hand off to their paralegals and what aspects of their work they would be assigning to the attorneys. Conflicts, the Colantano firm has the most significant conflicts, and I'd like to hear them talk about that. But BBK also had some conflicts, and we should get clarification on that. And then I think we should talk to E.O. Hinman about the sorts of issues that are going to come up with the applications, like for example, the tax sharing agreement between the county and the cities, and having an attorney and I noted that the Sloan and the Colantano firm both had experts on local government revenue and those sorts of issues. And so to have somebody on staff there that could weigh in whatever capacity, not sure what capacity they would need to weigh in on, but having had experience with tax sharing agreements, asking, that's one example of things that may come up in our, with applications that we could then ask, what sort of experience do you have with that? Maybe consolidations, if maybe water district consolidations in the Ukiah Valley, and asking specific experience around those issues and comparing the applicants on those sorts of things that we know we're going to be facing. So those were two examples. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner McGorty, Horsley, and then Cole.
So as far as format goes, I'd recommend a 30-minute interview. There's no reason to drag this out with 15 minutes in between, so that it doesn't take all day to go through the process. I also want to thank the Personnel Committee for already having started this investigation, and I certainly mean no disrespect to you to say that you didn't try to come up with a solution, and I want to thank you for that. I think that there are additional issues, though. Like I said, this is somebody an important team member, and how we move forward on a lot of issues is going to be guided by them, so we want to be sure we got the best person.
Thank you, Commissioner Horsley.
Yes, thank you. Our EO has said she wants to use a legal firm in an enhanced manner, so maybe getting a little more detail on that and what that would entail would be important before interviews are done, so that we can specifically ask questions about that grouping of tasks would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Holt?
Yes, with respect to the executive committee, I also wanted just to, that I know they've done a lot of work on this, and EO and you have as well. I think this can be really brief. If we have, maybe limit those number of questions, limit the time, and make it quick, and then I believe we would quickly come to some kind of consensus quite quickly. So that was my concern as well, was it can be a short process, just another check-in, because the executive committee obviously has done a lot of work on this. So.
Thank you. And I'll just state for the record that I am open to continuing this process. I don't know that we're going to really get to know people in 30 minutes. So it's kind of, I mean, I think it's, if we have more specific questions that you really want answered, I think that would really be the best process for me, because otherwise, like I said, we've been working with Marcia for a year. So I have a sense for how it is to work with her. I don't think I'm going to get that from the other legal counsels, particularly if they're going to be assigning staff. So just food for thought as we continue this process. Executive Officer Hinman, do you need any other questions answered at this point, or do you feel like you're ready to move forward?
Well, I guess one question I have is how do we select those top 3 or 4? So I don't know if that's something we meet with the executive committee with, or how would the commission like that to look?
I would think that, even though I agree that perhaps the process was flawed, but go ahead and use what you've already done and your rating system for this round for the top 3.
Commissioner Horsley?
I would have concerns about that based on the points that were given for conflict of interest. And again, I think, well, at least Commissioner Roden and myself, I think our top 3 were the same based on expertise, and also adding Marcia to that, so there'd be 4. That would be my recommendation. And I would just say that when my past experience with Sanitation District and with Inland Water and Power, we were very quickly able to tell that what that person we were interviewing, what it would be like. And what they did was they brought on the principal, and then they brought on the attorney that would be working directly with us. And it was very easy to get a feel for if there was an affinity there or not, and their abilities. So we didn't really have an issue with it. In both cases, it turned out in an excellent manner.
Thank you. And just for clarification for Commissioners Horsley and Roden, that would look like Marcia A. Birch, Law Office, Qualentano, Highsmith and Watley, PC, Sloan, Sakai, Yang, and Wong, LLP, and Best Krieger, LLP. I think we're the 4 for the commissioners. Commissioner McGorty and then Commissioner Ward.
You could also have the option of all of the board weighing in on suggested, just basically give a ranking, if they want to, of who we think should be interviewed, and then take whoever numerically comes up in the top 3 positions. If people feel they want to be, as thorough as possible.
To do the paper sort themselves instead of
Yeah.
going with the top 4 that we already just talked about.
Well, just add to it, just add to the just kind of get an affirmation from the rest of the board.
Commissioner Ward.
Just a process question. So we have these questions. I want to understand how we're going to proceed. Is it the questions that are then going to give to the executive committee to ask? And then the executive committee comes back with another recommendation? Okay.
Yeah, I do believe that that's the request that's being made.
Okay.
So again, just as far as process, all of the information that the Personnel Committee and that the Executive Committee received is in the documentation, it's in the agenda packet for today. We didn't receive anything different. We used our own best judgment and did our own research, and speaking with staff, I love to Google every single person. I also checked LinkedIn references and peeked a little bit on their social media accounts just because that's how I do my research. So if you have questions or concerns about the information that we received today, please reach out to Executive Officer Hinman so that those questions can be included in the informational interviews. I think that that would streamline the process at this point. We all have the same information. We've all been given the opportunities to do our own paper sort and research. And so I would just recommend that we interview the 3 law firms plus Marcia, so 4 law firms that I already stated. I'm happy to repeat them again with the executive committee. And I would just love it, Executive Officer Hinman, if you can confirm, and I do believe Member McGorty is correct, that the other commissioners can just listen on Zoom if they're not weighing in, that's a perfectly reasonable way to have them included in the process, but if we could just confirm that, and then we could get that meeting scheduled so that we could hopefully move forward. Does everybody agree that that's how the process can move forward?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands come up on Zoom, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward to item 8, information and report items. 8A, work plan, current and future proposals. Executive Officer Hinman.
Thank you, Chair Mulhern. This starts on page 185 of your agenda packet. You'll notice I did streamline the staff report a little bit and focus more on the tables, just to make things a little more clear, less wordy. So the applications on file are essentially at this point all pending tax share agreements, which is a process conducted by the county assessor, auditor, CEO's office, and the Board of Supervisors. We do have one pre-app on file that we are working through with the city of Fort Bragg for the potential annexation of properties for the purpose of recreation and water storage. We did receive a formal request from the city of Ukiah to withdraw their application to detach the sanitation district areas, and a refund of the remaining balance has been issued with the claims. For the work plan, Hinman and Associates has hired an additional analyst, as we mentioned before, and she will be assisting us with developing the study plan for the coastal region water and wastewater agency studies in the coming month. I don't have anything further at this time.
Thank you. Committee members, do you have any questions? Mr. Ward?
The date of application, looks like they're all pretty new, but wasn't Anderson Valley like 2 years ago?
This is a new application from Anderson Valley. We did process an application from them about, I think it was 2017.
Yeah, so what happened to that one? It just got renewed into this one?
No, we did complete that one. That one included a annexation in that, you're correct, and they did drop that through the
They
tax share.
dropped it, okay.
Tax share process. So we proceeded with the activation of latent powers at that time. And this is annexation of their full sphere.
Seems like we've had some of these applications forever, and they're all 22, 23.
No. Reiterations.
Thank you. Commissioner Roden?
Yeah, I just have a question for you, E.O. Hinman, about, the application activity and future proposals table would be useful in us figuring out some questions about, asking the applicants, well, do you do that? But I wanted to ask you, just maybe picking out one example, Elk Community Services District activation for latent powers for wastewater services. At what point in processing that application do you seek legal advice, or would you maybe go through that process and not need any? I'm just kind of curious how you use it in and different applications, what you need.
Sure. It's very application specific. I can say on that one in particular, it's questionable whether they need to activate, or it's questionable for what they are intending to do, whether activation of powers is the best approach. So we have worked with Marcia on that, our legal counsel on that question. At what point does the activation of powers, is that necessary, and when can they maybe pursue a different avenue? We've also used our legal counsel extensively for the CSA 3 questions on whether or not, on how best to activate powers for the CSA to do what the county is seeking to do regarding the Sherwood pilot
Right.
project, and what other avenues the county may pursue outside of the LAFCO process to do that. So those are the types of questions that we often seek guidance from our legal counsel on.
That's really helpful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Are there applications that come along that are pretty clear cut and you don't need to ask? For
Sure.
legal?
Yeah, yeah, it just depends on the if it's very clear and it meets the, the criteria under CKH and
Right.
our policies, then we don't always seek their counsel, although we often run our resolutions past legal counsel just to be sure we've captured everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing no additional questions. We can move on to item 8B, correspondence,
None to report.
and 8C, CALAFCO Business and Legislative Report.
We did, the CalAFCO staff workshop was last week, and our analyst Larkin Filer did attend. Also, there is the CalAFCO Legislative Committee meeting this Friday on May 5th. So if anyone's interested, I'd be happy to share that notice and agenda with them. I don't have anything further at this time.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions from the dais, so we'll move on to 8D, Executive Officer's Report.
The only thing I had to report was that we have hired another part-time analyst. She has a land use planning and background and municipal service review experience, so we're thrilled to be having her come on. We'll be bringing her up to speed in the next month and then plugging her primarily into the application processing and the work plan development.
Thank you. Commissioner Horsley.
Does she live here in Mendocino County?
She does not. She lives in San Diego.
Well, that's fine. Zoom. I mean, it works. It works well, so.
I do know that Hinman and Associates has been seeking qualified applicants for a few different positions. It's been very challenging to find somebody local. As we all know, in our various agencies, hiring local staff can be a challenge. So
The
thank you.
expertise is what's important, so that's great. Good for you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 8E, committee reports. Are there any reports? Uma, when do you think that the Policies and Procedures Committee should start meeting after legal counsel is selected?
I don't recollect that we have anything pressing for our Policies and Procedures Committee at this time, so I would recommend waiting until after. It's good to have our legal counsel review any policies and procedures that we put in place to make sure that we're meeting the statutes and not overstepping ourselves somehow, so.
Thank you. I think that RFP process is something we want to put in a parking lot for that committee.
Okay.
Thank you. Item 8F, Commissioner reports, comments, or questions. Commissioner Horsley.
I just want to apologize for being a couple minutes late. I had a flood in my kitchen, and it's oak floor.
Oh.
So they're already starting to curl.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm just sick to my stomach, but I had to clean it up and get it.
Yeah, best.
Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no additional comments, seeing no hands online, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. We'll see you all at a regular commission meeting June 5th, 2023 at 9 a.m., 501 Low Gap Road. Thank you.